is our Africa about our attitudes. And today we allow our light to be in the room, and to be in that is Saturday morning discussion with everyone. And we allow ourselves to listen to our opinion once again. And that is us representing us in our seasons, right? Let's give this light a little bit of a dimmed. And that remains us representing ourselves in our seasons. And with representing ourselves in our seasons, we are in that this morning's motivation is our awokeness within season. What we are enjoying this morning is a cup of amazing tea with amazing milk in, and with the amazing color and flavor in our season, right? And in where we find ourselves at in our seasons. And while we are representing in our every awokeness in season, we are representing in that there is what is our opinion for this year, what has our opinion been, and having to really appreciate the completeness of the year in general. When you appreciate the completeness of your year, you look at the circumstances, that had you challenged, and that is the excitement of the year. And there is a lot that happened, right? Currently on my Facebook page, I have login problems, right? And I don't often get login problems, but this morning when I was trying to post a reel, because you can't from your browser post a reel, right? And while I was trying to post a reel, I had login problems. And I often during the season told myself that I am not going to pray for the circumstances in this world, because I have prayed and God has heard my prayer. It is not that we find ourselves in a season that we are going to continuously make ourselves paranoia about the circumstances. But I have learned that there's people that find themselves in paranoia circumstances, guys that are in war, and that so often countries and people in countries find themselves guilty of sending these guys into war. And Africa has been one of those countries where some of the South African guys has gone into war. And it is really that the South African young women and young men today that find themselves in the countries have to really tell themselves the things that they sometimes so often are boasting and arrogant about on social media. So I know when people are signing me out to my Facebook page, right? And then I learned that someone is busy on my Facebook page with people's photos and with people's posts that they are not meant to do. So they log into my account from somewhere else, and it's either from the Facebook offices, and then they find themselves working on photos that some people share on their post that some of my friends share, and then they share it on my page, and people sit in different countries and they sit and go through these photos. And then specifically when there's rugby on television, and some of the times when there's sports on television, last week it was because when there was cricket on television, and the South African international people that works with these people really sometimes are busy with other things in our Facebook pages. And I know we have said it before in South Africa, said it in 2020 when I was there, that the government are busy with stuff on Facebook, and how the government are messing on certain people's Facebook pages. And I have had that problem quite a few weeks ago, where I also started to log in, and people's posts were on. And then I go log into via the browser site, and then I learned that they are sharing stuff next to the storyline. That's one thing to make jokes. I always say New Yorker magazine jokes and all the jokes that people have edited on some of my AWOKH fashion photos, and other things that people sometimes do that can sometimes be harmful and disruptive to countries, and that sometimes causes the young boys to have to go out into war. Because the world exactly is that some people look at circumstances in the world and they want to argue it away. And the young boys in this season, and they find themselves challenged in wars and challenged with arguing in countries that they have been deployed in to war at. And then the South African people that you believe on the social media pages, you believe for that specific guys that goes into war. It is not that every one of our country's people don't realize what they're doing, and they're sometimes just sharing enjoyment. And there's some people in our countries that really realize that they are really sometimes arguing with the guys who went into war, who find themselves challenged in other countries. And therefore, I often look at Facebook. And when I logged in this morning, I learned that there's people that's once again busy on my Facebook page with photos that they are either sitting in different countries and they're logged into the account, and they then share information onto your page. And when you open the page, when someone in a different country opens RIBEA's Facebook page, they exactly see next to a storyline what someone else is trying to tell them. They exactly see by the first post what someone else is trying to tell them. And such is our generation in general. And when I logged in now this morning, and I was now able to log in via the browser side, I learned that one of the rugby guys, right, who was deceased in our street, right, and one of the rugby people's photos are there on my page. And when the rugby guy traveled, right, and he came from New Zealand and he died in a car accident, right? And another friend of a brother of someone who's also a rugby player was now exactly on my page, right? So when I open my page, those photos that appear exactly. People maybe sometimes have posted it yesterday, and people who are working on it are sharing it onto your page. So this morning, when you open your page, it appears there. And it is those things that when they're trying to lock you out, then they are sometimes busy with other things and sometimes busy with agreement. Therefore, we really, as a generation in season, have to educate ourselves out of that. That is abusive to someone else, right? And that is when a Vogue business says something, and when young people are enjoying themselves, and they're enjoying themselves, right? And I constantly see our young boys' photos on the page. That is exactly what everyone else in South Africa are doing. They are themselves on the weekend. And then there's other people out there that are sometimes sharing photos that they really want to now say to RIBEA Elise, or they really want to now fight with the army guys. And there's a lot of people in South Africa who realizes that they are fighting with the army guys, and they're arguing on Facebook posts with the army guys and with certain people in different circumstances in the world. And therefore, today, with the Africa about those decisions and choices that we make concerning what are we going to post on our social media pages, right? Today, we have the amazingness of YouTube, where we can share advice and where we can educate on a platform that everyone doesn't feel so abused when they press play on a YouTube page, right? It is that we have to educate ourselves. What is it that we as a generation find ourselves supporting one another at? It is one thing for our generation to say that no one cares about guys who goes into war and who has signed up to work for the army and for the defense force of the world. And it's another thing for our generation to say that, you know what, these guys didn't sign up to go and be killed out in countries. These guys signed up and got employed. Whatever signed up means, today you sign an agreement and you say that you have signed up for it, right? And so you exactly say the way people are saying, the ways the circumstances in Africa has been for many years. It has been that is, you say it because it's exactly what is happening. And some of these guys have really have decided to really make the decision to be employed as, as an army guard, to be employed in the defense force, and to be in that is the protective services of the world in general, not for the world to find themselves having arguments and creating arguments the whole time. And now the next best thing after an argument that countries are having, they send boys into war. And that's now a solution, and it has become a solution to many countries. It is that I educate on a Vogue business, and that, you know what, for a Vogue, we have really decided to listen to that. That is our opinion. That is not someone else's way of saying it. That is not someone else creating a circumstance around what they're saying. But that is exactly RIBEA Elise's opinion, and where RIBEA Elise are giving our opinion on and are opinionating at, right? It is that season that you have allowed yourself to give an opinion, right? And when you give an opinion of the circumstances that you find yourself at, or of what you might have been challenged at, right? So that you have had the opportunity to learn to explain yourself about, or to learn to voice that is required for you in your season. You exactly do that. That is in fashion, that is in business, that is on a social media page, non-abusive, non-oppressive to the person that would view your page, as well as to you yourself, right? So you do not allow yourself to oppress yourself what you are voicing on social media. And specifically for me on my pages, right? My pages is firm, my fashion is for fashion, my education is education, and my opinion on my choice of music, my opinion on where I find myself at in the season that I'm at is exactly that. That is the completeness of representing me in my season. And it's exactly that when you represent yourself, you would sometimes learn to be non-oppressive to yourself. Non-oppressive to yourself means you're not gonna abuse someone else, right? While wanting to be fine. Remember, when you abuse someone else, then you find yourself as being endangered by that you try to abuse someone else of. And therefore, having to learn a generation of people to be in that they are non-abusive to themselves. They learn, therefore, to be non-abusive to someone else with what they are and with the choices that they have to make. Many people today in our countries find themselves being part of church groups, right? That has had the opportunity to rule the world in whatever university choices people have, financial advantages that people have, and therefore also in that has become the educated and the non-educated group in our generation. And therefore for churches, young church people are very much informed about certain things that are happening and wars that are starting relating from our reactions in our countries. Not a lot of people in church has been educated about it. Not a lot of churches has been educated about it. But there's a lot of churches that find themselves, the Roman Catholic Church, the New Apostolic Church in South Africa. There's a lot of churches that exactly know what is happening in the world and how their church's involvements form part of that is happening in the world. When it comes to international sport leaders, there's a lot of churches that plays part in that wants to lead the world, but their opinion is they want to lead the world in that makes it seem that the church governing body is that representation, educative body that would represent the generation, when in actual fact that the church's decisions are sometimes oppressive and sometimes depriving to a generation of people. And therefore, in the challenges that we have in our generation currently, we should learn to listen to who is our leaders currently. And we educated on leading this generation with our Facebook and our Instagram live streams. We educate exactly what it is that our countries require in leadership, right? It is not that you're going to now go to Hun Church and you're going to belong to Hun Church and you're going to want to go and lead the world in international sports decisions. And we have a lot of South Africans finding themselves around the table that they are in management and in leadership with international sports, right? With international decisions. And those guys that are exactly sitting around those tables are exactly guys that has put half of the men in South Africa in prison. How can you reason to put guys in prison that forms part of your every country's decision, right? And South Africa today sits in that is half of young men that are well educated, finds themselves owning shebeens, right? They find themselves in gangsterism. They find themselves having to sell drugs for half of the groups, for half of South Africa's church group of guys that sits in international meetings and that internationally feels that their opinion is exactly that builds a world. When you want to build a world in a generation that has got so much to represent, then you exactly need the people that forms part of the generation itself. And therefore, for those guys who find themselves in international sports meetings, for those guys who find themselves in international sports organizations and employed in churches that now forms part of the international leading generation team that now wants to lead a generation, we really want to say that our representation starts in our international countries. Our representation starts with where we are giving our opinion in our national circumstances on the ground level. That the circumstances in South Africa is of such a sort that the requirement is for our national country to find themselves having to learn to listen to how to manage our country in a way that is non-oppressive to the men and to the women in our countries, right? And to the children in our countries. It is that the international world forms part of that. That is the voice of everyone in the world. And when South Africa finds themselves having to give an opinion that is leading a generation or leading a country that is oppressing one another, and they give an international opinion, then the world is exactly going to do exactly what is happening with the opinion that the world are receiving in season. And therefore, what's our motivation today? We do not want to have a lot to say other than the year has brought us to this amazing season, the beginning of festivities for our international nation. And in that RIBEA say it because he says it, right? We say it the way that we want to say it. We represent what how we say it, but our every requirement is that there is the awokenness in what we are saying, right? That awakened reaction, that awakened attitude, that awakened way in reasoning, and the character that the world are creating while they are trying to educate the international world. And therefore, in all of those choices and decisions, the international world has got the opportunity to decide that the circumstances looks like that, the environment is that the wind is blowing in every season, but the requirement for the world to learn that everyone in the world forms part of the season is those decision makings when it comes to the people that lead our countries and our nations in their opinion itself. And therefore, with all over the placeness this morning, we are going to just say that you should continue to listen to our opinions, continue to listen to our work passion, continue to listen to what we have to say in a season. But when it comes to international countries, they decide to listen to South Africa. You know, the armies in this world are very firm on direct opinions, right? And they are very firm on how everyone knows the armies can be direct, they can be very well organized. And when it comes to decision makings in the world that are affecting the guys that find themselves employed in the army and in the defense force, and then world leaders and people in countries who decides to listen to people who is oppressing their own people should also listen to that are sometimes circumstances that finds itself in different countries that sometimes doesn't hit the countries that creates the circumstances. We are very firm in saying if South Africa finds itself creating circumstances and war circumstances in different countries by giving an opinion that is leadership to the world, and the leadership to the world is exactly that is abusive to the world, and then South Africa should not disregard the fact that the circumstances in South Africa sometimes looks calm and kind. But I always say on leading this generation discussion that while the circumstances in South Africa itself looks calm and kind, the South African people find themselves in punishment because the world requires proper leadership. The world requires people that can look at the world in one and say that this is how the world are required to be managed. You know what world leaders today do is they say that they are going to accept that there is the leadership opinion from South Africa, and they implement it. And when the world leaders are done implementing that, then South African people are being punished in the community with gunshots, with abuses, with prostitutions, with kidnappings because of world leaders' decisions. Guys goes into armies and into war because of those decisions. So for the South African people today that finds themselves in an arrogancy, that finds themselves in international sports, that finds themselves having their opinion be found to oppress the world, that is exactly the circumstances that is happening in the country exactly. I always say that no one is immune to the punishment itself that are due those who try to abuse the international world. And therefore, for South African people who find themselves sitting in those meetings, in international sports meetings, managing those teams, and they are oppressive to the world are listening into it. And the world is that no one else in this world is really immune to that. There is punishment for that can sometimes be oppressive and depriving to one another in the world. And therefore, we listen constantly into, and we're going to have to constantly listen into the circumstances that are happening in the world. And when South African people find themselves having an opinion on Japan, North Korea now went to Putin, and they now had a meeting and they had a discussion, and it was on the news. And it is a lot that are sometimes being said, right? But when South Africa finds themselves giving an opinion to Putin or to North Korea or to Ukraine to further aggress wars with one another and to further unstir one another, then South Africa are due punishment, because the leaders in this world are fine with leading their countries with where they are at. They are well educated to manage and lead their countries. And the only thing we should educate leaders, and that leaders sometimes require of us in our countries to do, is to educate them out of that is non-oppressive, not to educate them further. And the further South Africa stirs aggression, the further leaders allows the aggression, but the further South African people find themselves being punished for that is those opinions that are sometimes one-sided. What we are firm in educating is that when we find ourselves not involved in circumstances that are worse in countries, our only opinions at that time should always remain to be that the war should end and that countries find themselves out of that is oppressive, the one to the other. We do not allow ourselves to give opinions to countries that are stirring more aggression with the circumstances and with that countries find themselves challenged at. It is that RIBEA ELISE am firmly requiring South African people who so earnestly has learned that they give opinion and that they are trying to protect themselves with having to be in management with the international sports organizations and having a safe haven in Dubai sometimes. Sometimes some of these leaders and guys get a safe haven in Dubai, and they travel to Dubai and they stir the whole world with aggression and arguments. And such is people in South Africa, and we are having to educate our people that when you give opinions, allow yourselves and your opinions to be non-abusive to the countries and to be non-abusive to humanity in general. It is not that we are favoring one country over the other country. No, our opinion should not be that is oppressing one country and favoring the next country. Our opinion should be that is firm and that is humanity have a right to be fine with where they're at, and humanity forms every one of us that is part of this amazing earth, and therefore in this amazing universe. And therefore, in this season, the Africanness about that is that we do not look into a circumstance and want to leave it like that and want to ignore what is happening in the world, because no one is immune to the circumstances of abuse, of poverty, being deprived, and of oppressions. It is that we educate one another and we reprimand one another out of that. And that is abusive, that is oppressive, that is depriving, and that is humiliative, the one sometimes to the other. And therefore, that's what I wanted to say today. What breakfast talk with RIBEA ELISE and with where our generation's opinion are at and having to be at in a time where our generation's opinion have to be constructive and non-oppressive. What are we actually not saying? But what is it that RIBEA ELISE is sometimes really having to be fun? Is that when, sorry for the all over the placeness, but I can really sometimes be all over the place with saying it, how I say it. But when we are having to educate our generation, they find themselves, RIBEA ELISE, some people find themselves having a good seat about it. And some people find themselves relaxing in that there is a good seat about it. And when they have a good seat about it, they manipulate their opinion with where they're at. And the world exactly looks like that. There is some people having an opinion on how to manage the world and having an opinion being implemented. And they have a nice seat in Dubai. And when they get a nice relaxing seat in Dubai, me and my brother, then we traveled to Dubai a few years ago, and we saw a whole lot of rooms for everyone to have a relaxing time at, while that's sometimes oppressive to the world. And there's a hotel for everyone to go and sit in and to manage the processes in the world from. And while everyone has a big hotel in Dubai and everyone can sit and relax and stir the world about it, the world is saying that we are non-aggressive to Dubai itself. But what RIBEA ELISE has learned, and if Dubai has the Al Jazeera channel, right? And they play the Al Jazeera channel there for RIBEA ELISE. And RIBEA ELISE looked at all the different hotels and that how many people can find their computer, their laptop, and they take a nice backseat with a laptop, and they have a nice jolly ride with giving an opinion around the world in 60 seconds. Thank you. And while everyone is in that they are having a relaxing seat in certain countries, a fine seat, and a fine vacation while serving the world, what RIBEA ELISE is directly saying to South Africa and to the South African people, if they have such an amazing seat there in Dubai and they've created for themselves a hotel room there, and that they are stirring aggression in the world to and from, and then our direct requirement is that such leaders should find themselves leading, in their own houses, and the world should allow themselves the time to lead where they are at and with that they are required to lead at. And that is all for what RIBEA ELISE wanted to say on this amazing Saturday morning, and with our amazing opinion and with where we are at in our season is that relaxing seed, that relaxing moment, that relaxing video, all of those relaxing teams that has the opportunity to give an opinion and people implement it and you get a jolly ride and the opinion is oppressive to someone. RIBEA ELISE say, give the world its own opportunity to manage itself and give people in international countries that is them deciding what is fine for them, rather than someone else who now finds themselves part of a Dubai team, right? We call it a Dubai team, the Jolly Ride team. And the Jolly Ride team has a jolly cruise in Dubai, right? And they have a jolly time in Dubai. And while they have a jolly time in Dubai, we want to tell the jolly team that exactly has a good laugh after they have a jolly time there, that the world is in a season where we are approaching 2024. I'm 40 years old now, the 22nd of November this year, and I'm in that is on my own pace, my own opinion. I own a AWOKH business and I represent with where I'm at my season, and everyone should feel fine to exactly do that. Don't tell yourself that you are waiting for the Jolly Ride team to give you a yay or a nay on your pages. RIBEA doesn't allow that. And they say, RIBEA, you've got so many followers and they don't even reveal themselves. They don't have to reveal themselves because RIBEA owns where she's at. RIBEA does not require them to say that she's acceptable or not acceptable in this generation. Her opinion is exactly that 0 likes is exactly 100% ownership of my AWOKH business. And that's where everyone else needs to learn and educate themselves to find themselves at. And therefore, because there's nothing wrong about what RIBEA ELISE is saying, and there's nothing wrong about what we are doing, there's nothing wrong about what we are educating and how we are educating. And once RIBEA ELISE has learned to accept her opinion in season, RIBEA ELISE learned to accept herself every season with where she's required to be at. And that's where everyone else is required to be at, accept it, own it, and do that. That is fine for you in any season. And that is amazing breakfast talk. And that is only a talk, and that's why we talk so much. What RIBEA ELISE. Have an amazing Saturday morning.